Hey there, welcome. Today I'm gonna go over everything that I read in the months of January and February this year. I started my channel a little bit too late to do a January wrap up separately, but I still wanted to talk about these books. I didn't read too much these last 2 months. Like I only finished reading 6 books in the last 2 months, which is like not my best, but I'm just happy that I'm reading, I guess. I do feel like I'm in a little bit of a slump lately, but I'm starting to come back. So let's get into it. The first book I finished in January is Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. I started this one in December, but ended up finishing it in early January. I read it as an ebook, and I think most of us are familiar, but this is the story of Twilight, except from Edward's perspective. Honestly, my overall thoughts on this are a little bit complicated. Edward was so frustrating sometimes. Like, I got so sick of his like constant battle with himself, like whether he should stay with Bella or not. Like, that is something that keeps cropping up in this whole entire series that I just don't buy. Like, it was something that really bugged me about New Moon as well. But anyway, I really pitied Edward in this book. Like, his self-hatred is so evident, but like, as a book, I feel like Meyer was really successful because like his character did stand out, like, as shitty of a character as that might be. Like, I really felt like I was in his head, and it was really kind of cool and interesting to see how his mind reading ability worked. I also kind of got a kick out of seeing what not just the Cullens but like all the vampires did when not around Bella, and also the like absolutely fucked up shit that they did to get to her in Arizona. Like, holy fucking shit. That highway scene at the end before they get to the ballet studio had me all kinds of fucked up. Like, that, I like literally could not believe what I was reading. Like, I guess minor spoilers, but like if I was involved in some sort of like dozen car pileup on the fucking highway because of some goddamn vampires that are trying to get to one human girl, I would be beyond fucking pissed. Like, that just, I kept thinking about that. I couldn't stop thinking about that poor woman that they hijacked her SUV and like sedated her and just like laid her on the side of the road. I couldn't stop fucking thinking about that lady because that lady would be me. I'm just an ordinary person. I swear to God, that to me is irredeemable because like, okay, the book tries to justify it by saying that nobody died, but just because they didn't die doesn't mean that there was like just because nobody died doesn't mean that no trauma was inflicted that day. You know what I mean? Like, that, oh, so fucked up. I couldn't take it. But that aside, the one scene that like did sort of redeem this book for me and actually, yes, literally drew a tear from me was that Christmas scene between Edward and Carlisle. That was so fucking adorable and wholesome. I just like, I could not fucking take it. Like, yeah, I love Carlisle. Damn it. That scene was so sweet. I couldn't take it. This was the final installment of my like nostalgia fueled Twilight fugue state that lasted all of December. I ended up giving Midnight Sun a 4 out of 5. It was memorable. I didn't really have any issues with the writing. Like, I know in Twilight, the very first installment, the writing was very rough, but in this one it was good. Like, I feel like Stephanie Meyer pulled off what she wanted to pull off. Like, all in all, you're not gonna find me defending Stephanie Meyer's honor anywhere, but like 15 years ago, I was definitely part of the first wave of like Twilight obsessiveness. So, you know, I'm kind of a sucker for all this. Yeah, I enjoyed it. The next one I finished was Aiden Thomas's Cemetery Boys. I listened to this one on audiobook, which I got from my library. The narration was by Avi Roque, and I thought it was pretty good. It was a little bit flat at points, but definitely serviceable. Cemetery Boys is a YA fantasy about Yadriel, a young trans man determined to prove himself to his family as a true brujo, and also about the ghost of a boy that Yadriel accidentally summons. I found this book to be really sweet, but kind of underwhelming. I didn't mind Yadriel's character until it came down to him like being too anxious to act. Like, that's a little frustrating in a protagonist, right? Like, you want to see your main characters act with agency. But I mean, I get it. He's got a lot going on, and I didn't really find that to be a problem during the entire book. Pairing often anxious Yadriel with like the rambunctious Julian was definitely the right choice. I really like that pairing. Overall, honestly, I don't really have that strong of feelings about this. I found the climax to be a little bit of a confusing blur, but I think overall, like, it's a fantastic YA story about a trans boy just trying to fit in. And the Latin American, like, cultural setting was really well executed as well. I'm half Latina myself, and I really like that, like, all different kinds of Latin American cultures were included in this. I thought that was so cool. I gave Cemetery Boys a 3 stars, and I'm looking forward to Aidan Thomas's future work. All right, the next book that I finished was V.E. Schwab's The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. I listened to the audiobook for this, again via Libby. The narration was fantastic. It was narrated by Julia Whalen. Again, I think a lot of us are very familiar with this book, but this is the story of a young woman in early 18th century France who makes a deal to live forever and is cursed to be forgotten. I ended up giving this a 4. Like, I really enjoyed it. I finished it happily. There is a detail in here, the thing between Addie and Henry, that I just oh, it's perfect. But I found the prose like a little bit too flowery at times. It's hard for me to describe what I find too flowery. Like, I felt like Schwab used the word folding a lot. I don't know, maybe that's just my memory being weird, but I felt like everything was folding over everything all the time. And honestly, like, I didn't really like Addie all that much. I liked her in the scenes that she shared with Luke. Honestly, like, Henry is my guy. Nervous bisexual solidarity. I was ready to rate this a 3, but like I mentioned before, the way that Addie and Henry's deals made this like perfect little loophole is just so I loved it. Like, saying this as a writer, that little detail right there, which, I mean, I say little, but I realized that it was the whole impetus for their relationship to begin with. But that little bit right there is just such a gorgeous little nugget of storytelling. And like, I can only hope that I could come up with something like that perfect one day. Huge props. I definitely found this way more engaging than A Darker Shade of Magic, which, you know, it's kind of hard to say because A Darker Shade of Magic is YA fantasy, which I do like, but this being adult, I think it's adult, right? I don't know, I just found this like way more interesting. But yeah, big props to V.E. Schwab for that one. I really liked it. All right, on to the next. So after Invisible Life, I listened to the audiobook for All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This one was narrated by Kevin R. Free, who I feel like exemplified Murderbot's voice really well. The audiobook of this was just over 3 hours, and I usually listen on like 1.5x or 2x speed, so I knocked this one out in an afternoon. I've heard a lot of praise for this series for a while now, and I was really excited to get into it. Murderbot is such a fun character. Like, I love this like apathetic, I don't even want to say person, I guess person, who needs to pretend to do their job, but all they really want to do is just like chill and watch serials. I did like all the other characters. Like, I liked how they were nice to Murderbot. Maybe that's silly, but I think it is silly, like, even in the context of the world, because like, aren't the Murderbots supposed to be just like treated as like cargo or tools? I didn't really latch on to the setting very well. I know it's a novella and there isn't much room for world building and stuff like that. I'm still kind of debating on whether to continue this series. Like, can anyone tell me if the later novellas are really good? That's kind of the thing, is like, they're just novellas. They won't take very long to listen to or even read, so it's not gonna be like a huge investment. But I'm also the type who, like, it takes me forever to get to a sequel. All Systems Red got a 3 from me and a tentative continuing of the series. So I'm trying to go in chronological order here. So here's where I DNF'd something. 1 DNF out of a total of 7 books is really not that bad. I DNF a lot of stuff. The one that I DNF'd this past 2 months was After the Flood by Cassandra Montag. This was a book that I had put on my TBR because it has some like conceptual similarities to the sci-fi that I wrote in 2020. It just took me a while to get to it. I listened to the audiobook of this from my library and I pushed myself to get to like 50%, but after pushing myself, I sort of realized like, this main character is so unlikable. She doesn't seem to like her daughter very much. much, and she treats absolutely everyone around her like shit. I couldn't really tell where the story was going. Like, it was a little bit light on plot, a little bit more heavy on character, which I don't usually like. I like stronger plot better than strong characters, if that makes sense. I'm trying to be more open to very character-driven stuff, but like with all that said, I couldn't really tell where the story was going and what significance anything had. I think this just wasn't what I was expecting. There's also this element of like, this book imagines what North America would look like after climate disaster and after the ocean levels rise so high that basically the only land left is like, you know, in Nebraska. And as interesting of a world as Montag has crafted, despite her irritating main character, it's also just like a teensy little bit anxiety inducing for me to read this. So yeah, I put that one down. Okay, my next book that I completed is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I listened to the audiobook of this. Fantastic narration by Cindy Kay. Absolutely loved it. I enjoyed this, but like my main gripe with it is that it took too long. Like the mystery element, the whodunit of it all, sort of, I felt like it was too drawn out for me. And I also often got lost in the weeds of the other POVs that Chloe Gong included. And I feel like everybody who's reviewed this has mentioned this, but like this is barely a fantasy. Like there is one story element in this that could be construed as fantasy. And even that, I wonder if this needed to be marketed as fantasy somehow, because that element could have been changed to something more realistic and still worked. I haven't read the sequel. I don't know if it has anything to do with the sequel. Like, I guess what I'm saying is that like that fantasy element did drive the plot forward and the story did need it to have substance, but it was barely fantasy. I think we all agree on that. All that said, I absolutely love Juliet and Roma. They're both types that I really like to write, so I really enjoyed the time that we spent with them. The setting was also fantastic. I think that was definitely the strongest part of this book, is that historical setting. Absolutely outstanding. I gave These Violent Delights a 4, and I immediately put the sequel on my TBR. We'll see how long it takes for me to get to it. Moving on. All right, my final completed book of February is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Let me take my hand off of that so you can see the spelling of the name. I am going to try to keep this short because I feel like this has gone on long enough. And also, there's not really much else for me to add to this conversation. I finished this book at 1 in the morning on February 28th, and I just had to go to sleep after that ending, I guess. If I were to describe this book in one word, that word would not be sad. It wouldn't be depressing. It wouldn't even be disturbing. It is all of those things, but to me, this book is devastating. And not just that it made me cry, honestly wail at many points, but it made me feel sick. It made me feel hollow. It was so intense at points. After X equals X, I had to take like a week off of reading it and just get a break because it was just too much. I at that point, I was just so frustrated with it and just sick to my stomach. Jude's past and a lot of his present are sickening and terribly sad, but something about X equals X just took a part of my soul. I wish I had, I wish I knew what else to say about this because it was incredible. And also I keep thinking about it. I finished it almost a week ago. I ended up rating A Little Life a 4 out of 5. It just feels wrong to give it a 5. Honestly, the way that I rate things, it should get a 5 just because of everything that it made me feel and the way that I loved the characters. But I think at least part of the reason why I can't give it a 5 is because I cannot in good conscience recommend this to anybody. Like, it's incredible, it's moving, it's tragic, it's well written. I mean, it is something special, but I can't tell anybody to read it. It's just too much. Okay, friends, thank you if you've watched. That is everything that I read in January and February of 2022. Take care and see you in the next one.